A 7-year-old girl terrified of water, gears pushed into the pool by her stepmother. Her father arrives just in time to save her, but discovers much more than a near drowning. Drawings, testimonies, and evidence reveal months of silent abuse. Now begins the fight for justice and for the healing of someone who should never have suffered. The luxury Kensington Gardens estate in West London displayed its imposing mansions like trophies of success amidst preserved greenery. At the Kingston residence, the Sunday afternoon silence was broken by a sharp scream that echoed through the meticulously manicured gardens. Robert Kingston, 42, a technology entrepreneur, parked his imported car at the mansion's entrance earlier than expected. The investor meeting had ended ahead of schedule, and he decided to surprise his 7-year-old daughter, Julia. The girl loved it when her father came home early to play, but what Robert found as he crossed the garden towards the pool area froze his blood. Julia struggled in the water, her small arms flailing desperately, while Victoria, her 35-year-old stepmother, watched from the edge of the pool with an impassive expression. There was no swimming instructor, no safety float, no protective equipment, just a panicked child and a woman who seemed indifferent to the despair. "Julia!" Robert shouted, throwing his jacket to the ground and diving into the pool without hesitation. In seconds he reached his daughter and brought her to the surface. The girl coughed violently, her body trembling with cold and fear. "What is going on here, Victoria?" he questioned, as he wrapped his daughter in a towel and held her close to his chest. Victoria adjusted her perfectly straightened blonde hair and crossed her arms over her designer dress. "We were having a swimming lesson. Julia needs to overcome this irrational fear of water. I read in a magazine that gradual exposure is the best therapy." "Gradual exposure?" Robert looked incredulously at his wife. "Where is the instructor, the floats, any safety equipment? She needs to learn to manage on her own, Robert. You pamper her too much." Victoria shrugged, as if it were an irrelevant detail. "All the children in the estate know how to swim. It's embarrassing to have a stepdaughter afraid of water at 7 years old." Robert felt his daughter tremble in his arms. Julia's brown eyes, so similar to her deceased mother's, were wide with terror. He noticed something that deeply disturbed him. It wasn't just fear of the near drowning. There was a look he knew well from his humanitarian trips to conflict zones. It was the look of someone constantly on alert. "We're going to the hospital." Right now, Robert decided, ignoring Victoria's protests that it was unnecessary exaggeration. In the car, as he drove to St. Thomas's Hospital, Robert watched his daughter in the rearview mirror, huddled in the back seat, wrapped in a dry blanket. Julia remained silent, but her eyes met her father's in the mirror. "Daddy," she whispered, so softly that Robert almost didn't hear, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, my love. You can tell me anything." "When you travel, Aunt Victoria," her voice trailed off. Robert slowed down, paying full attention. "She makes me go without dinner when I don't tidy my room the way she likes, and she locks me in there when I get bad grades at school." Robert felt a chill down his spine. "She makes you go without food? Locks you in your room?" Julia nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "She says if I tell you, no one will believe me, that they'll think I'm making things up. Why didn't you—" "Ever tell me this before, sweetheart?" Robert asked, feeling overwhelming guilt. "Because she said you'd be angry with me, that you'd send me away to a boarding school, like what happened to her friend's daughter." Julia hugged the worn teddy bear she always kept close. "Is it true, Daddy? Are you going to send me away?" Robert felt his heart clench. "Never, my love. I will never send you away. You are the most important person in my life." Upon arriving at the hospital, Dr. Lucy Miller, the on-call pediatrician, examined Julia carefully. Robert observed every movement, every reaction of his daughter. The girl flinched at the slightest touch, kept her eyes down and responded only in monosyllables. "Mr. Kingston, may we speak in private?" the doctor asked after the examination. In the hallway, away from Julia's ears, Dr. Lucy was direct. "Your daughter shows signs of near drowning, which is already concerning, but we also identified indications of mild to moderate malnutrition. For a child from a family with your purchasing power, this is unusual. Is there anything you wish to tell me?" Robert felt as if the ground disappeared beneath his feet. "Malnutrition? What do you mean? We have staff, a cook. How is this possible?" Mr. Kingston, I am legally obliged to activate our social services in such cases. Carla Hayes, our social worker, would like to speak with Julia if you permit it. Robert nodded, stunned. While waiting in the hospital lounge, he called his business partner and childhood friend, Mark. Mark, I need a favor. Find me the best family law solicitor in London, and discreet, it's urgent. When Carla Hayes, a social worker with 20 years of experience, emerged from the children's consulting room, she held some drawings made by Julia. She showed them to Robert, a small whale alone in a dark ocean, a house with a girl locked in an upstairs room, and an empty plate on a table. Mr. Kingston, your daughter is in a vulnerable emotional situation. She told me, through these drawings, and a careful conversation, that she suffers systematic deprivations. I strongly recommend immediate protective measures. Robert looked at the drawings, feeling a mixture of pain and determination grow within him. How had he not noticed? How had he allowed this to happen under his own roof? What should I do? He asked, his voice choked. First, ensure Julia's immediate safety. Then seek specialized legal advice. I am available to follow the case and testify if necessary. When Robert returned to Julia's room, the girl was asleep, exhausted by the physical and emotional trauma. He sat beside her, holding her fragile little hand. He thought of the countless business trips, the long hours at the office, the blind trust he had placed in Victoria, whom he had married 2 years after Helen, his first wife and Julia's mother, had passed away. At that moment he made a silent promise to his daughter. He would never again allow her to suffer. He would go to any lengths to protect her, even if it meant facing a battle against the woman he once believed he loved. Outside the hospital, the London sky darkened, announcing a storm. Robert didn't know it, but this was just the beginning of a long journey to save not only his daughter's physical safety, but her soul. In his pocket, his phone vibrated. It was Victoria, probably wanting to know where they were. Robert switched off the device without answering. Some bridges, once broken, could never be rebuilt. The hospital room was silent except for Julia's soft breathing. Robert remained seated by the bed, observing his daughter's every movement. The rising London sun began to filter through the blinds, creating golden patterns on the white floor. When Julia finally opened her eyes, Robert smiled, trying to hide his concern. "Good morning, Princess. How are you feeling?" Julia looked around, recognizing the hospital environment, and her body instantly stiffened. "Is Aunt Victoria here?" "No, my love. It's just us," Robert assured, stroking his daughter's hair. The relief on the girl's face was so visible that it broke Robert's heart. Dr. Lucy entered the room at that moment, bringing a trolley with breakfast. "Look what we have here, pancakes. With chocolate sauce, your favorite according to your dad," the doctor announced with a gentle smile. Robert watched carefully as Julia stared at the food. Instead of attacking the pancakes like any child would, she looked at him, hesitant. "You can eat, sweetheart. It's all yours," Robert encouraged. With trembling hands, Julia began to eat, first slowly, then with a voracity that confirmed the doctor's suspicions about dietary restrictions. "Mr. Kingston, while Julia has breakfast, I'd like to speak with you in the corridor," Dr. Lucy requested. Outside, the doctor did not soften her words. The tests confirmed a picture of mild to moderate malnutrition, consistent with intermittent food deprivation. We also noted small bruises in different stages of healing on her arms and legs. Julia said they are from when she's clumsy, but the pattern suggests something else. Robert felt his blood boil. "Are you suggesting my wife?" "I'm not making accusations, Mr. Kingston. I'm reporting medical and behavioral facts. Your daughter shows classic signs of a child in a situation of psychological abuse and neglect. The excessive fear, the way she checks for permission, even for the most basic things, the malnutrition, these are indicators we cannot ignore." At that moment, Carla, the social worker, joined them. "I spoke with Julia again this morning, using non-invasive techniques. She showed me through drawings how she feels small and scared at home, especially when you travel." Robert ran a hand over his face, trying to process it all. "What should I do now?" "Firstly, ensure a safe environment for Julia," Carla advised. Do not take her back to the same environment until we are certain she will be protected. Secondly, seek specialized legal help. I've brought some contacts who can guide you." Robert nodded, determined. Mark had already sent a message confirming he had arranged a meeting with Dr. Henry Burton, considered one of the country's best family solicitors, for that afternoon. "And Mr. Kingston," Carla added, "I strongly recommend starting psychological therapy for Julia as soon as possible. I have a colleague specializing in child trauma who could see her." When he returned to the room, he found Julia playing with a nurse who had brought paper and crayons. The girl was drawing once again a whale, now accompanied by a larger fish beside it. "Look, Daddy, it's—" "You with me," Julia explained with a shy smile. "The little whale isn't alone anymore." Robert swallowed the lump in his throat. "She never will be again, my love." His phone, which he had momentarily reconnected, vibrated incessantly. 15 missed calls from Victoria, several messages demanding explanations. The last one read, "If you don't respond in an hour, I'm calling the police. You can't just disappear with my stepdaughter." Robert blocked the number without replying. He needed time to think, plan, and protect Julia. After hospital discharge, instead of returning to the mansion in Kensington Gardens, Robert took Julia to the Kensington Hotel on Park Lane. He chose a spacious 2-bedroom suite, ordered room service for lunch, and called Mark. "I got Dr. Henry Burton's contact. He's expecting you at 3 p.m. at his office," his friend informed him. "Rob, what's going on? You disappeared. Victoria is calling everyone." "It's complicated, Mark, and much worse than I imagined." "I'll tell you when I can," Robert replied, watching Julia, who was watching cartoons on television, momentarily seeming like a normal 7-year-old. "I need another favor. Can you go to my house and pick up some things for Julia? Clothes, her favorite teddy bear, some books. But don't tell Victoria where we are." At precisely 3 p.m., Robert and Julia arrived at the elegant office on Oxford Street. Dr. Henry Burton, a man in his 60s with grey hair and a serene expression, greeted them personally. He had asked his assistant to prepare a children's area in the adjacent room, where Julia could stay under supervision while they talked. "Mr. Kingston, before we begin, I need to fully understand the situation. No omissions," the solicitor said once they were alone. Robert recounted everything: the pool incident, Julia's revelations, the medical diagnoses, the social worker's recommendations. As he spoke, he realized how negligent he had been in not noticing the signs. "For the past 6 months, I was working on a major project. I traveled more than usual. I left Julia in Victoria's care, trusting that she would treat my daughter as her own." Robert shook his head, desolate. "How could I have been so blind?" Dr. Henry observed him with compassion. "The first step to solving a problem is recognizing it. The second is to act. Let's focus on that now." The solicitor opened a notepad. "We need evidence, Mr. Kingston. Accusations like these are serious, and unfortunately, your wife may try to distort the narrative, claiming you are trying to distance her from the child for other reasons." Robert frowned. "What kind of evidence?" "We already have medical records. We need witnesses, someone in the house who may have witnessed the mistreatment. Staff, driver, gardener. We also need physical evidence, security cameras from the residence, text messages, emails, anything that can corroborate Julia's account." Robert thought for a moment. "We have cameras throughout the house, including the pool area. The system stores recordings in the cloud for 90 days. I have remote access." "Excellent. We also need a detailed psychological report for Julia, done by a professional who can testify in court if necessary." As they discussed strategies, Robert's phone vibrated with a notification. It was an email from the legal department of the Kensington Gardens estate. Victoria had filed a formal complaint alleging that Robert had kidnapped Julia after a domestic dispute and requested access to the estate's security footage to prove her version. "She's trying to get ahead of us," Dr. Henry observed. "It's not uncommon. The first narrative to reach the public or authorities often has a psychological advantage." Robert felt a wave of panic. What if she gets the recordings before us? She won't without a court order. And even if she did, the recordings would show exactly what happened in the pool, which corroborates your version. Dr. Henry made some notes. "Mr. Kingston, from now on, every step must be calculated. Do not respond to provocations. Do not make public accusations. Do not discuss the case with anyone other than me and the professionals involved in Julia's care. When they left the office, it was already night. Julia held her father's hand tightly as they walked to the car. On the way back to the hotel, they passed a toy store on Regent Street. "Can we go in, Daddy?" "Just to look?" Julia asked shyly. Robert felt his heart ache. Such a simple request, made with such apprehension. "Of course we can. We can even choose a present for you." The girl's eyes shone with a joy Robert hadn't seen in a long time. Inside the store, Julia was enchanted by a small blue plush whale. "It looks like the one in my drawings," she explained. Back at the hotel, while Julia slept hugging her new toy, Robert sat on the suite's balcony, contemplating the lights of London. His phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Mr. Kingston. This is Dolores, your cook. Mr. Mark gave me your number. I need to speak with you." "It's about Julia and Mrs. Victoria." Robert felt a shiver run down his spine. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together. Breakfast at the Kensington Hotel was unlike anything Julia had experienced in years. The room service table was laden with options: fresh fruit, assorted breads, eggs, juices, and hot chocolate. The girl's eyes widened at the abundance. "Can I really choose whatever I want, Daddy?" she asked, still unsure. Robert nodded, carefully observing his daughter's every reaction. "Anything you want, Princess." While Julia savored breakfast, Robert planned his next step. Dolores's call the previous night had brought new perspectives to the case. The cook had worked at the Kingston mansion for almost a decade, since before Julia's birth. She had witnessed Victoria's gradual transformation after marrying Robert. "Mr. Robert, she changed after you were alone," Dolores had explained over the phone. "At first she treated the girl well when you were around, but when you traveled, it was different." Julia couldn't eat outside of mealtimes, even when she came home hungry from school. She had to finish everything on her plate, even when she was sick. Dolores recounted that she had tried to intervene several times, preparing extra snacks for Julia or notifying when the girl was locked in her room, but Victoria always found ways to neutralize her attempts. "She threatened to fire me many times, saying I was encouraging bad habits. I stayed because of the girl, sir. I couldn't abandon her." Robert arranged a meeting with Dolores for that afternoon at a discreet cafe in Mayfair. Before that, however, he had another important appointment. At 10 a.m., a soft knock on the suite door announced the arrival of Gabrielle Evans, the child psychologist recommended by the hospital's social worker. "Hello, Julia. My name is Gabby. I brought some fun things for us to play with today." She introduced herself, showing a colorful bag full of playful materials. Initially shy, Julia soon opened up to the psychologist, who used play and drawing therapy techniques. Robert observed from a distance, amazed by Gabrielle's ability to create a safe environment where his daughter felt comfortable expressing herself. After the session, while Julia watched a children's movie with headphones, Gabrielle spoke with Robert in a low voice. "Mr. Kingston, it's still too early for a complete diagnosis, but I can say that Julia shows clear signs of post-traumatic stress and anxiety. Her drawings reveal feelings of isolation, fear, and abandonment. The whale that repeatedly appears represents herself, small and vulnerable in a hostile environment." "What about the larger fish she drew next to the whale?" Robert asked, remembering the hospital drawing. "That's you, a protective figure, but one she feared losing. Notice how in the first versions, the larger fish is distant. Now it's closer, which shows she's starting to feel safe again." Gabriel recommended regular sessions and provided guidance on how Robert should deal with his daughter's fears and insecurities. Routine and predictability are fundamental now. She needs to know that she can trust her basic needs will be consistently met. After the psychologist left, Robert received a call from Dr. Henry. "We have a situation. Mr. Kingston, your wife has filed for a protective order against you, alleging parental alienation. She claims you are preventing her contact with her stepdaughter without legal justification." Robert felt his stomach sink. "That's absurd. She's the one who—" "I know, but the judge provisionally granted it. It's standard procedure in cases involving minors. For now, you must allow supervised visits until the preliminary hearing, scheduled for next week." "Supervised visits? After everything she's done?" "Calm down. Supervised means you or another responsible adult will be present the entire time. And we are preparing our rebuttal, based on the medical and psychological reports. But we need more, Mr. Kingston. We need the recordings, the testimonies, everything we can gather. After hanging up, Robert explained the situation to Julia as gently as possible. The girl's reaction was immediate panic. "I don't want to see her, Daddy. Please don't make me go back." Julia's eyes filled with tears and her body began to tremble. "Calm down, my love. You won't be alone with her for a second, I promise. I'll be there the whole time." Robert hugged his daughter, feeling his responsibility weigh even more heavily. "And it will only be for a little while until we resolve everything." In the afternoon at Café Sterna, Robert met with Dolores. The cook, a middle-aged woman from the north of England with shrewd eyes, had brought a small notebook. "I started writing everything down after I realized what was happening. So," she explained, pushing the notebook across the table. "Dates, times, what Mrs. Victoria said, how long Julia went without eating when she was locked in her room." Robert flipped through the notebook, feeling a mixture of gratitude for Dolores's dedication and horror at what he read. Systematic details of neglect and psychological abuse, recorded with the precision of someone who knew they might one day be needed. "Why didn't you tell me before, Dolores?" he asked, unable to hide the hurt in his voice. The cook's eyes filled with tears. "I tried, sir. Many times. I called your mobile, but Mrs. Victoria always intercepted. She said they were domestic matters that she would handle herself. She sent messages that she answered pretending to be you." Dolores wiped away a tear. "And I was afraid of losing my job. I'm a widow. I support my daughter through university." Robert understood. Victoria controlled everything in the house. Communications, staff, access to Julia. She had created a perfect system to isolate her stepdaughter. "There's more." Mr. Robert Anthony, the driver, also saw a lot. "And George, the gardener she fired last year because he gave Julia fruit secretly. I need to speak with all of them, Dolores. And I need you to testify officially." The cook nodded, determined. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect the girl." As he left the cafe, Robert received a message from Mark. His friend and partner had, on his own initiative, hired a private investigator to gather information about Victoria's past. "Rob, you need to see this." Edward found out Victoria was married before for only a year to an entrepreneur from Brighton. The marriage ended abruptly, and there are rumors that it involved a similar situation with his son. Robert felt a chill. It wasn't an isolated incident. There was a pattern. Back at the hotel, he found Julia playing with her new plush whale. She seemed more relaxed, though her gaze still carried shadows of the trauma she had experienced. "Daddy," Aunt Gabby said, "tomorrow we're going to play a new game," the girl commented with a shy smile. "She said I'll be able to tell stories about Azulina the whale." Robert smiled, grateful for the progress, however small. "That's great, Princess. I can't wait to hear those stories too." His phone vibrated. It was an email from Dr. Henry with documents to sign digitally, the rebuttal to the protective order and the request for exclusive temporary custody. As he read the documents full of legal terms, a notification from an online gossip magazine caught his attention. "Crisis in Paradise. Entrepreneur Robert Kingston abandons mansion and kidnaps daughter after argument with model wife." The article, clearly biased, presented Victoria as a devoted stepmother, devastated by her husband's irrational behavior. There were photos of the couple at social events, always smiling, and statements from close friends who swore Victoria treated Julia as if she were her own daughter. Robert closed the browser, disgusted. Victoria had begun her public opinion manipulation campaign. The battle would be harder than he imagined. That night, after putting Julia to sleep, Robert remotely accessed the mansion's security system. He spent hours reviewing recordings from the past few months, meticulously documenting every piece of evidence of neglect or abuse he found. There were scenes that broke his heart. Julia being deprived of meals, locked in her room for hours, receiving constant criticism about her weight, appearance, and behavior. And most devastating, the video from the previous day, clearly showing Victoria pushing Julia into the pool and watching impassively as the girl struggled, only intervening when she heard Robert's car arriving. With the evidence in hand, Robert sent everything to his solicitor. The message accompanying the files was short. "We will fight to the end." The visiting room at the London Legal Aid Centre was designed for neutrality: pastel-coloured walls, comfortable but impersonal sofas, educational toys neatly arranged on shelves. Robert watched Julia reluctantly interact with Victoria under the watchful supervision of a social worker appointed by the judge. Victoria dressed impeccably for the supervised visit, as if ready for a photo shoot: perfectly styled hair, subtle but strategic makeup, a dress that suggested maternal simplicity. Her behavior was also meticulously calibrated: gentle smiles, a soft voice, expensive gifts. "I brought your favorite doll." "Darling?" Victoria said, extending a luxurious box containing a porcelain doll Robert had never seen before. Julia looked at her father, hesitant before responding softly, "I don't like porcelain dolls. They scare me." A flicker of irritation crossed Victoria's face, so quickly that only Robert, who knew that expression well, noticed it. "But of course you do, Julia. Remember how happy you were when I bought that collection last year?" Robert felt his stomach churn. It was so obvious now. Victoria didn't even know her stepdaughter's basic preferences. The social worker, Renata Campos, observed and noted every interaction with experienced eyes. After 40 tense minutes, she announced the end of the visit. Robert noticed the immediate relief in Julia's body. On the way back to the hotel, the girl remained silent until she finally asked, "Do I really have to see her again, Daddy?" "We're working to resolve this, my love," Robert replied, hating the helplessness in his voice. Back in the suite, they found Mark waiting for them in the lobby with a folder of documents. His friend's grave expression indicated important news. "Julia, how about watching your favorite cartoon while I talk to Uncle Mark?" Robert suggested, settling his daughter in the room with her tablet and plush whale. In the suite's living room, Mark wasted no time. Edward delved deeper into Victoria's past. The story is much darker than we imagined. Mark presented a detailed report. Victoria Miller, born in Manchester, had moved to Brighton at 18 to try a career as a model. After modest successes, she met Charles Davies, a real estate entrepreneur, a widower with a 5-year-old son. The marriage lasted only a year and ended in litigation, with generous financial compensation for Victoria in exchange for a confidentiality agreement. Edward managed to speak with the ex-husband, Mark continued. He initially refused to break the agreement, but when he learned that a child was potentially at risk, he decided to help. Charles's account was disturbing. His son, Matthew, began exhibiting worrying behaviors a few months after the marriage: extreme fear of Victoria, weight loss, frequent nightmares. A nanny eventually reported seeing Victoria locking the boy in a closet as punishment and rationing his food to maintain discipline. When I confronted Victoria, she manipulated the whole situation, making it seem like I was paranoid and overprotective, Charles had told the investigator. I even doubted my own judgment until I found security camera recordings she didn't know existed. The divorce was quick and discreet. Charles prioritized his son's protection and agreed to pay a substantial sum to settle the matter, without publicity. Matthew, now a teenager, was still in therapy to cope with the trauma. Charles is willing to testify if necessary, Mark concluded. He said he never forgave himself for not formally reporting Victoria at the time, allowing her to do the same to another child. Robert felt a wave of nausea. History was repeating itself, and his daughter was the new victim. There's more, Mark continued. Edward also discovered that Victoria hired a public relations agency specializing in crisis management. They are preparing a campaign to portray her as a victim of a controlling husband and you as an unstable father using his daughter as a weapon in the divorce. As if to confirm this information, Robert's phone vibrated with a news notification. A new article appeared on one of the country's largest portals. Tech entrepreneur's wife denounces manipulation and parental alienation. The report included close sources alleging that Robert had a history of emotional instability after his first wife's passing, and that he used his fortune to control those around him. "This is absurd," Robert exclaimed. "I never gave any reason to—" "We know that," Mark interrupted. "But Victoria is building a public narrative, and it's working. Social media is already divided, with hashtags like Justice for Victoria gaining traction. Robert took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. What does Dr. Henry suggest? He says we should focus on the facts and evidence, not the court of public opinion. The main hearing is in 3 days. He's confident, especially after the new evidence we've gathered. At that moment, Robert's phone rang. It was Anthony, the family driver. Mr. Roberts, sorry to call at this hour. Something happened that you need to know. Anthony reported that Victoria had called all the staff for a meeting that morning. She offered salary increases and generous bonuses in exchange for loyalty during this difficult period. For those who would testify in her favor, she promised legal assistance and guaranteed lifetime employment. She specifically said she needs us to confirm that you were absent and that she always treated Julia like a true mother, Anthony explained. Dolores refused on the spot and was fired immediately. I'm calling from the car, taking her to her daughter's house. Mrs. Victoria is furious. Robert thanked the driver for his integrity and promised to ensure Dolores would not suffer financially for her loyalty. After hanging up, he felt momentarily overwhelmed by the magnitude of the battle he faced. Victoria had resources, influence, and was willing to use any tactic to win. His moment of discouragement was interrupted by Julia, who came out of her room with a new drawing. Look, Daddy, I made a drawing for Aunt Gabby. The drawing showed the little whale, now accompanied not only by the larger fish, but also by several other colorful fish. They're our friends, Julia explained. Dolores, Anthony, Aunt Gabby, Uncle Mark, they're helping us, aren't they? Robert felt his eyes well up. Yes, Princess. We have many friends helping us. That night, after putting Julia to sleep, Robert received an unexpected call. Dr. Sarah Marshall, the next-door neighbor, a pediatric surgeon who had always been cordial but distant. Mr. Kingston, I don't know if I should get involved, but I can't stay silent anymore, she began, her voice tense. In recent months, I've heard disturbing things coming from your house. Screams, crying, sounds of doors being locked. I even considered calling the authorities several times, but why didn't you call? Robert asked, more curious than accusatory. A heavy sigh on the other end of the line. Your wife and I met at a charity event a few months ago. When I mentioned hearing Julia crying, she explained that the girl had an anxiety disorder and was undergoing treatment. She said she followed strict medical guidelines, including reflection time in her room. It seemed plausible at the time. I'm a doctor, but not a psychiatrist. Sarah continued, explaining that her suspicions grew over time. I started noting dates and times, recording some of the more alarming sounds. When I saw the news about you leaving home with Julia, I knew my suspicions were correct. Robert could barely believe it. Another unexpected ally, another source of evidence. Dr. Marshall, your help could be invaluable. Could you share these recordings and notes with my solicitor? I'm already preparing everything to send first thing tomorrow. After the call, Robert sat on the suite's balcony, watching the illuminated city. The magnitude of the situation hit him with full force. His wife, the woman he had trusted to help raise his daughter, had systematically abused Julia psychologically, while building a perfect facade of a devoted stepmother. Behind the anger and guilt, however, a steely determination emerged. The truth was coming out piece by piece. People were speaking up, choosing the right side of this battle. His phone vibrated with a message from Dr. Henry. I managed to bring the hearing forward to tomorrow. Judge Clara Davies, known for prioritizing child welfare. Prepare yourself, it will be intense. Robert looked at the room where Julia slept, clutching her plush whale. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of genuine hope. The battle was just beginning, but he was not fighting alone. We'll win this, Julia, he whispered into the night. I promise. The meeting room at Dr. Henry Burton's office had been transformed into an operations center. On the long dark wood table, documents, reports, and electronic devices formed meticulously organized piles. Robert, with deep dark circles under his eyes after a sleepless night, reviewed every detail of the legal strategy alongside the solicitor. Let's review the sequence of evidence presentation, Dr. Henry proposed, adjusting his reading glasses. We'll start with the medical and psychological reports, establishing the factual basis of the harm. Then we'll present witness testimonies in increasing order of impact. As they discussed, Julia was in another room with Gabriel, the psychologist, in another therapy session. In recent days, the girl had made remarkable progress. She spoke more, smiled occasionally, and, although she still had night terrors, she could now verbalize her fears. "Mr. Kingston," interrupted Ronald Peters, a forensic technology specialist hired by Dr. Henry, "I've finished the analysis of the home automation system logs. The results are conclusive." Ronald projected a series of graphs and tables onto the room's screen. "The smart home system installed in your residence records every activation of devices, lights, air conditioning, electronic locks, everything. These records are stored on encrypted servers and are virtually inviolable." The technician highlighted a specific series of records. "Here are the activations of Julia's room's external lock. In the last 6 months, we identified 47 occasions where the door was locked from the outside, for periods ranging from 2 to 8 hours, mainly during your business trips." Robert felt a lump in his throat. Even though he already knew this from Julia's and the staff's accounts, seeing the cold, impersonal technical evidence had a different impact. "Most importantly," Ronald continued, "these records contain unique digital signatures associated with the smartphone or device that issued the command. In all cases, the device used was the iPhone registered in Mrs. Victoria Kingston's name." Dr. Henry nodded, satisfied. "Excellent. This eliminates any possibility of them claiming it was another household employee or some system malfunction." "There's more," Ronald added, sliding to the next slide. "I also analyzed the usage patterns of the smart refrigerator and pantry. There are significant disparities between the opening records of these compartments. During the day, when Victoria was home alone with Julia, and the nighttime or weekend periods when Mr. Kingston was present, the frequency is 68% lower during the periods of paternal absence." Robert closed his eyes for a moment, fighting back emotion. Each new piece of evidence reinforced not only Victoria's guilt, but also his own failure to protect Julia. "Finally, I recovered the backup of the pool area security footage," Ronald concluded, tapping the screen to start a video. "The system performs automatic cloud backups, something Mrs. Victoria apparently was unaware of. The recording clearly showed the incident that triggered everything. Victoria leading a visibly terrified Julia to the edge of the pool, the girl's evident resistance, the deliberate push, the long minutes Victoria impassively watched as Julia struggled in the water, and finally the late intervention, only when the sound of Robert's car arriving was heard. This," Dr. Henry stated gravely, "is irrefutable proof of deliberate negligent conduct that placed Julia at direct physical risk. There is no context or explanation that justifies such actions." At that moment, the door opened and Mark entered, accompanied by a middle-aged man Robert recognized from the investigation photos. "Robert, this is Rodrigo Mendez, your former building manager. He was fired by Victoria 8 months ago." Rodrigo greeted Robert with a firm handshake, but his eyes revealed discomfort and guilt. "Mr. Kingston, I should have come to you sooner. But Mrs. Victoria threatened to sue me, said she had influential friends who would ensure I'd never get a job in London again." Robert nodded in understanding. "The important thing is that you're here now." Rodrigo pulled a small-bound diary from his backpack. "I started recording what I saw after the 2nd month working there. At first I thought maybe I was misinterpreting, that they were just strict parenting methods, but it soon became clear it was something more serious." The building manager described how he frequently found Julia locked in her room during his rounds, how he heard the girl cry from hunger, how he once found her in the garden picking fallen fruit to eat secretly. "What caused my dismissal was when I gave her a sandwich. The girl had been eating only thin soup for almost 2 days, as punishment for knocking over an imported vase. I couldn't bear to see it. I made a sandwich and took it to her secretly. Mrs. Victoria found out through the cameras and fired me on the spot, without severance, threatening me if I spoke up." Dr. Henry meticulously documented everything, preparing Rodrigo for his testimony at the hearing. When all the details were finally aligned, Gabrielle brought Julia back to the main room. The girl held a new drawing. The small whale now swam in a colorful ocean, surrounded by fish of all kinds. "Look, Daddy, the little whale isn't afraid of the water anymore. Aunt Gabby said the water isn't bad. We just need to learn to swim in it." Robert hugged his daughter, feeling a mixture of pride and hope. The recovery journey would be long, but Julia was already showing extraordinary resilience. Dr. Henry observed the scene with a discreet smile before resuming his professional demeanor. "Mr. Kingston, there's one more delicate matter we need to discuss. The financial aspects." While Julia returned with Gabrielle to continue her therapeutic activities, the solicitor presented a folder with financial reports. "Our team analyzed the joint finances. In the last 2 years, Victoria spent approximately £3.2 million on personal purchases, clothes, jewelry, spas, travel. In contrast, expenses for Julia, excluding school which you pay directly, totaled only £22,000 in the same period." Robert frowned. "That's impossible. I left a corporate card exclusively for Julia's expenses, with a monthly limit of £30,000. Where did that money go?" The answer came from Philip Hayes, the team's forensic accountant. "The card was rarely used for Julia. Most of the expenses were at restaurants and stores where Victoria made purchases for herself, occasionally buying something small for Julia as a disguise." Robert's indignation grew with each new revelation. It wasn't just negligence, it was a calculated plan, coldly executed for years. "There's one more thing," Philip added. "We identified regular transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, totaling almost £1 million in the last year. The transfers coincide with the dates of your longer trips." Dr. Henry adjusted his glasses. "This suggests premeditation and financial preparation for a possible breakup. She was building an escape fund while still enjoying the lifestyle provided by your wealth." The meeting extended for another 2 hours, each detail meticulously analyzed and incorporated into the strategy for the next day's hearing. When they finally finished, it was past 7 p.m. Back at the hotel, Robert found Julia sleepy after an emotionally exhausting day. As he helped her with her bath and dinner, he noticed how his daughter carefully observed every food available, still unsure about what she could or couldn't eat. "All of this is for you, princess. You can choose whatever you want." After putting her to bed, Robert sat in the armchair beside her, watching his sleeping daughter's serene face. In a few days, his entire world had been turned upside down, revealing a dark reality that existed beneath the seemingly perfect surface of his life. His phone vibrated with a notification, another biased article in a celebrity magazine. This time with close sources claiming that Robert had snapped after discovering Victoria planned to leave him, and was using false accusations of child abuse as revenge. He turned off his phone, refusing to feed that distorted narrative. The truth would come out not through media statements or public wars, but through the undeniable force of evidence. That night, for the first time since the pool incident, Robert slept soundly. He woke up refreshed, determined, ready for the decisive confrontation that awaited him. At breakfast, he noticed that Julia ate with less hesitation, even asking for a second helping of fruit, a small but significant sign of progress. "Today is an important day, isn't it, Daddy?" she asked, surprising him with her perception. "Yes, my love. Today we will tell our truth to people who can help us." Julia nodded, serious. "Aunt Gabby said that telling the truth, even when it hurts, is brave. She said I'm brave like a whale swimming against the current." Robert smiled, moved by the wisdom emerging through the childish metaphors. "You are the bravest person I know, Julia." At 9 a.m., the driver sent by Dr. Henry arrived to take them to the Royal Courts of Justice. On the way, Robert received a message from Sarah, the doctor neighbor. "I arrived at the courts early. I brought all the recordings and my notes. We are all here for Julia." Robert looked out the car window, observing the city that never stopped. Somewhere in that same traffic, Victoria was probably heading to the same destination, confident in her power of manipulation and her carefully constructed facade. But today, the technical truth, cold, precise, and undeniable, would be exposed. "We're almost there, Mr. Kingston," the driver announced, turning towards the imposing Royal Courts of Justice building. The Royal Courts of Justice commanded respect with its modern and imposing architecture. On the 14th floor, the room designated for family court hearings maintained a purposeful sobriety. Light walls, austere furniture, white lighting that allowed no shadows or hiding places. It was a space designed for truth. Robert, impeccably. Dressed in a discreet navy blue suit, waited with his legal team, Julia remained in the special children's room, accompanied by Gabriel and a judicial psychologist, where she would be heard only when necessary and in an age-appropriate manner. Dr. Henry reviewed his notes with the concentration of a conductor before a crucial performance, while his assistants organized documents in chronological order. Across the room, Victoria arrived escorted by 3 solicitors from a renowned firm specializing in high-profile cases. She wore a sober beige ensemble that suggested modesty and suffering, her hair pulled back in a low bun, minimal makeup, the perfect image of the wronged wife. When her eyes met Robert's, he saw something he had never noticed before. A calculating emptiness, a meticulous coldness that had always been there, but which he had chosen to ignore. At exactly 10 a.m., the side door opened, and everyone stood. Judge Clara Davies, 58, with grey hair cut in a severe bob and eyes that seemed to see through any facade, took her seat. Her reputation was well known, rigorous, meticulous, and absolutely focused on the welfare of the minors involved in the cases she judged. "We are here to evaluate protection measures related to the minor Julia Helen Kingston, age 7, the judge announced, her firm voice echoing in the room. "This court has no interest in personal dramas or emotional accusations. We want facts, evidence, and above all, what is best for the child in question." After the initial formalities, Victoria's solicitor, Dr. Paul Reynolds, began his presentation. With eloquence cultivated over decades in courtrooms, he painted a picture of Robert as a workaholic entrepreneur, frequently absent, who suddenly kidnapped his daughter in a moment of emotional instability. "Your Honor, Mrs. Victoria Kingston has been Julia's primary caregiver for the past 5 years, establishing routines, healthy boundaries, and consistent discipline, elements that Mr. Kingston, in his rare appearances in family life, frequently sabotaged with extravagant gifts and excessive permissiveness." Robert felt his blood boil, but maintained a neutral expression as Dr. Henry had instructed. Mr. Kingston's disproportionate reaction to a simple domestic accident, a fall in the pool during a swimming lesson, reveals a worrying pattern of instability, Dr. Reynolds continued. In addition to depriving the minor of the maternal presence she was accustomed to, he initiated a systematic campaign to alienate the child from her stepmother, inducing false narratives and manipulating healthcare professionals with his financial influence. When Victoria's solicitor finished his initial statement, Dr. Henry calmly rose. "Your Honor, before I begin my argument, I would like to request that the court view a video that will establish the factual basis for this entire case." With the judge's authorization, the pool security camera recording was displayed on the large screen in the room. The silence was absolute, as everyone watched the clear and undeniable scene. Victoria leading a visibly terrified Julia to the edge of the pool, the argument, the deliberate push, and, most damning, the long minutes during which Victoria impassively watched as the child struggled in the water. When the lights came on, the judge's face was stony. Victoria whispered furiously with her solicitors, who seemed as surprised as everyone else. "This video, Your Honor, directly contradicts the version of domestic accident or swimming lesson. What we see is a deliberate action that placed a child at immediate physical risk," Dr. Henry stated, "and this is just the beginning of the evidence we will present today." Over the next 90 minutes, Robert's team methodically built their case. Dr. Lucy Miller presented the medical reports detailing Julia's malnutrition and bruises in different stages of healing. Gabrielle Evans explained the psychological traumas evidenced in the drawings and therapy sessions. Dolores, the cook, recounted, with a choked voice, the years of systematic food deprivations. Mrs. Victoria said Julia needed to learn to value food. She even locked the pantry and refrigerator with padlocks when Mr. Robert traveled, Dolores testified. "Several times, I found the girl drinking tap water to appease her hunger." Anthony, the driver, described how he was instructed never to answer Julia's questions about when her father would return from trips. Mrs. Victoria said it was to not create expectations in the girl, but I saw how Julia counted the days. Rodrigo, the former building manager, presented his diary with detailed records of incidents. Dr. Sarah Marshall, the doctor neighbor, shared her audio recordings capturing screams and cries through the walls, along with meticulously noted dates and times. With each new testimony, Victoria maintained an expression of studied incredulity, occasionally wiping invisible tears with a silk handkerchief. Her solicitors tried to discredit each witness. Dolores was a resentful employee for being fired. Rodrigo had questionable motivations. Sarah was a busybody who barely knew the family. The decisive moment came when Ronald Peters presented the technical data. With graphs, system logs, and irrefutable metadata, he demonstrated the pattern of Julia's room lockings, always coinciding with Robert's absences. He presented the home, automation records showing restricted access to the kitchen. He displayed the financial statements, evidencing the misuse of funds intended for Julia. "Digital systems, Your Honor, do not lie," Ronald concluded. "They have no emotions, no bias. They merely record actions." Judge Clara, who had remained impassive throughout the presentation, then asked a direct question to Victoria's solicitors. "Does the defense question the authenticity of these digital records?" "Doctor," Paul hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. "We do not question the authenticity, Your Honor, but we dispute the interpretation of the data. Locking the room could be a security measure. Limited access to the kitchen could be to prevent domestic accidents. And the pool video? Does that also have an alternative interpretation?" the judge interrupted, with a tone that left no doubt about her opinion. The last to testify was Charles Davies, Victoria's ex-husband, who had traveled from Brighton especially for the hearing. With a grave voice and a fixed gaze on Victoria, he recounted his almost identical experience years earlier. "I recognize now that my silence, even protected by a confidentiality agreement, was a moral failing. It allowed the same pattern of abuse to repeat with another innocent child." By this point, even Victoria's solicitors seemed uncomfortable with the direction of the case. They consulted nervously, whispering damage control strategies. Finally, the most delicate moment arrived: Julia's testimony. The judge determined that it should take place in a special room, only with her presence, that of the judicial psychologist, and Gabrielle. Robert and Victoria would watch via closed circuit, unable to intervene. In the small room decorated with children's motifs, Julia sat comfortably on a colorful sofa, hugging her plush whale. Judge Clara, who had completely changed her tone to a gentler and more welcoming one, began an informal conversation about drawings and games before gradually introducing the relevant questions. "Julia, can you tell me what your routine was like when your father traveled?" the judge asked softly. With simple, direct words of a 7-year-old, Julia described what she had lived through in recent years. She spoke about being locked in her room, when she did bad things, about having to earn full meals, about being instructed never to tell her father, because no one would believe her. When the judge asked about the pool incident, Julia hugged her plush whale tighter. "I'm very scared of deep water. Aunt Victoria said I was being silly, and that she would teach me to swim. I asked not to go, but she got angry." Julia's voice was almost a whisper. "She pushed me and I fell. Water went into my nose, my eyes, I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to—" Julia stopped, unable to verbalize the terror of that moment. And what happened next? The judge gently encouraged. "My dad came and pulled me out of the water. He would never let me drown." Back in the main room, Judge Clara resumed her formal demeanor. There were no more witnesses to hear, no additional evidence to present. It was time for closing statements. Dr. Paul attempted one last desperate defense, suggesting that all testimonies were part of a conspiracy orchestrated by a vengeful husband, that the technical evidence was circumstantial, and that separating Julia from her stepmother would cause even more trauma to the child. Dr. Henry, in contrast, was brief and direct. "Your Honor, the facts speak for themselves. A child was systematically neglected, deprived of basic needs, and finally placed at direct physical risk. Any decision that does not prioritize her safety and well-being would be a failure of justice." Judge Clara retired for only 15 minutes before returning with her decision. "This court has seen and heard irrefutable evidence of a pattern of abusive conduct against a helpless child," she declared, her voice carrying the weight of judicial authority. The convergence of medical, psychological, testimonial, and technical evidence leaves no room for alternative interpretations. The judge looked directly at Victoria, who maintained an expression of indignant shock. Mrs. Victoria Kingston, this court grants full and exclusive temporary custody of Julia Helen Kingston to her father, Mr. Robert Kingston, and issues a restraining order prohibiting any contact between you and the minor until a full psychiatric evaluation is conducted. Victoria stood up abruptly, her face contorted in an expression that finally revealed her true nature. This is absurd. A conspiracy. You can't do this to me. Mrs. Kingston, control yourself or you will be removed from the room, the judge warned coldly. Ignoring the warning, Victoria continued, he bought all of you. He used his money to manipulate everything. Julia is a liar, always has been. That ungrateful child after everything I did. Remove Mrs. Kingston from the room, the judge ordered the bailiffs, who promptly escorted a hysterical Victoria out. Robert remained seated, stunned by the outburst that finally confirmed everything the evidence had already proven. Dr. Henry squeezed his shoulder in a gesture of silent support. Mr. Kingston, the judge continued, this court also orders that the case be forwarded to the Crown Prosecution Service for criminal investigation of the conduct reported here. Additionally, continuous psychological support for Julia must be provided, with bi-monthly reports to this court. When all formalities were concluded, Robert was led to the room where Julia was waiting. Upon seeing her father, the girl ran into his arms, smiling as he hadn't seen her smile in a long time. The lady in the robe said, I'm going to stay with you forever, Daddy. Is it true? Robert hugged his daughter, feeling the weight of the world leave his shoulders. Yes, my love. No one will ever separate us again. As they left the courthouse through the private exit, protected from journalists and curious onlookers, Robert noticed something different about Julia. A small gesture almost imperceptible to any casual observer. She had left the plush whale on the car seat, without that anxious grip of someone fearing to lose their only comfort. It was a small step, but a significant one. The first of many on the long journey of recovery they still had ahead. 6 months had passed since the court hearing. The apartment in Notting Hill, with its large windows letting in natural light, had become Robert and Julia's new home. The decision to sell the mansion in Kensington Gardens was immediate. That space, once a symbol of success and stability, now carried memories too heavy for both of them. The new apartment had been decorated with Julia's active participation. Her room, painted in shades of blue and green reminiscent of the sea, was filled with children's books, educational toys, and a growing collection of plush whales of all sizes, a re-signified symbol that now represented strength and overcoming. Robert watched his daughter through the half-open office door. Sitting at the dining table, Julia drew intently, her tongue peeking out from the corner of her mouth in a sign of artistic dedication. Her hair, once always pulled back in severe braids at Victoria's insistence, now fell in free curls over her shoulders. "What are you drawing, Princess?" Robert asked, approaching after sending the last email of the day. Julia proudly held up the drawing. "It's our family, Daddy." The colorful paper showed not only the little whale and the larger fish that represented them, but a true school of marine figures, a starfish with glasses, clearly Gabriel, the psychologist, an octopus with many busy arms, certainly Dolores, now the official housekeeper of the new residence, a mustachioed crab, Anthony, who had agreed to continue as driver, and many other marine creatures representing people who had become an important part of their lives. Robert smiled, moved by the evident evolution in his daughter's drawings. The dark tones and isolated figures had given way to a colorful and vibrant ocean. "It's amazing, Julia. Can we put it on the living room wall?" "Yes." She nodded enthusiastically, and then, as if remembering something important, "But first I need to finish. Dr. Sarah and Judge Clara are still missing." Dr. Sarah Marshall, the doctor neighbor who testified in court, had become a frequent presence in their lives. Initially due to professional concern for Julia's recovery, she soon developed a genuine friendship with father and daughter. Her Sunday tea visits had become a cherished tradition. As for Judge Clara, She had surprised everyone by staying personally updated on the case, going beyond her formal obligations. Her decades of experience with traumatized children had made her a valuable counselor during the difficult moments of recovery. "After the drawing, bath time, okay?" Robert gently reminded. Julia nodded without that panicked look that once accompanied any mention of water. Swimming lessons, now with an instructor specializing in aquatic phobias, were helping her gradually overcome the trauma. The routine established in recent months had been fundamental for the girl's recovery. Robert had completely reorganized his professional life, delegating responsibilities and reducing travel to an absolute minimum. His company, Kingston Innovations, now operated with a hybrid work policy that allowed him to be home every morning and evening. Breakfast together was sacred, a time to plan the day, talk about dreams from the night before, and for Robert to ensure Julia ate properly. The pediatric nutritionist who accompanied them celebrated at the last consultation. The girl's weight had finally reached healthy parameters for her age. The new school, smaller, and with a humanized approach, had been carefully selected with the help of the therapeutic team. There, Julia made her first genuine friendships, children who visited her to play and who were welcomed with the eager joy typical of her age. Sessions with Gabrielle continued, now twice a week. The psychologist often commented on Julia's remarkable progress. She is rebuilding her emotional security at a surprising pace. Children have incredible resilience when they receive adequate support. Robert himself had started therapy, a step he had initially hesitated to take, but which he now recognized as essential. The sessions helped him process the overwhelming guilt he felt for not having noticed the signs of abuse, for having blindly trusted Victoria, for having prioritized work over his daughter's emotional safety. "We cannot change the past," his therapist frequently reminded him, "but we can decide how it will influence our future." And the future, once cloudy and threatening, now seemed promising. The criminal proceedings against Victoria continued their course in court, with formal indictment for mistreatment, neglect, and psychological abuse. Julia had been spared further testimony thanks to the compelling evidence already presented at the custody hearing. "Daddy, can I invite Louise to sleep over on Saturday?" Julia asked, as she put away her drawing materials. Robert smiled. Louise was Julia's new best friend, a girl with contagious energy who had helped his daughter come out of social isolation at school. "Of course you can. We can make that homemade pizza you two love." Julia's spontaneous smile, still rare but increasingly frequent, lit up the room. Robert mentally stored that image, a treasure among so many precious moments he now consciously collected. After dinner, while they tidied the kitchen together, an activity Julia insisted on participating in, perhaps as a way to reassert her access to food, Robert received a call from Dr. Henry. "Mr. Kingston, I have news. The judge in the criminal case has ruled that part of the blocked funds from Victoria's accounts be allocated to a trust fund for Julia as partial compensation for the damages caused." "I don't want her money," Robert replied automatically. "I understand your feelings, but legally this amount belongs to Julia, not to you. It will be held in conservative investments until she turns 18, when she can decide how to use it. Perhaps for university, perhaps for another significant purpose." After ending the call, Robert reflected on how justice operated in unexpected ways. No monetary value would ever compensate for what Julia had suffered. But there was something poetically, just in knowing that the resources Victoria had accumulated, at the expense of her stepdaughter's well-being, would now be reverted for the girl's own future. The following Friday, Robert hosted Mark for dinner. His friend and partner, who had been instrumental throughout the crisis, watched with admiration the transformation of the family environment. "I still can't believe how we didn't notice anything for so long," Mark commented, as they watched Julia play in the living room after dinner. "Victoria was extremely skilled at maintaining appearances, and I was too busy to see beyond the surface," Robert replied, without the self-deprecating tone that once accompanied these reflections. Therapy had helped him accept his share of responsibility without being consumed by guilt. "And now, what are your plans?" Robert watched his daughter for a moment before replying. "I've redefined my priorities. The company is still important, but I've set clear boundaries. I'm relearning to be a father, or perhaps learning for the first time to be the father Julia truly needs. Mark nodded, understanding. And what about that foundation project? Is it still going ahead? The idea had emerged during one of Robert's therapy sessions, to transform the traumatic experience into something positive that could help other children in similar situations. Yes, we are in the final planning stages. The Blue Whale Foundation will be officially launched next month. The foundation, inspired by Julia's drawings, had multiple objectives: to fund therapy for child abuse victims, to train educators to identify early signs of neglect and mistreatment, and to strengthen reporting and support networks. Sarah, Gabriel, and even Judge Clara had agreed to join the advisory board. The following Sunday, an important milestone awaited father and daughter. After months of therapeutic preparation and specialized lessons, Julia finally felt ready to face the sea. The small beach on the Cornwall coast offered gentle waves and calmer waters, perfect for a first experience. Robert watched Julia at the water's edge, wearing her life jacket and holding his hand firmly. "Ready, Princess?" he asked, feeling his own anxiety mingle with pride. Julia took a deep breath, looking at the small waves gently breaking in front of her. "Ready, Daddy. Let's go in together like the big whale and the little whale." Step by step, they entered the warm water. Julia flinched initially but did not retreat. When the water reached her knees, she stopped, breathing quickly. "It's okay. We can stay here as long as you want," Robert assured. To his surprise, after a few minutes, it was Julia who suggested, "Can we go a little further?" They advanced until the water reached the girl's waist. Robert held her firmly, but noticed that her grip on his hand no longer had the desperation it once did. "I'm swimming, Daddy!" "Like a real whale," Julia exclaimed when, with the support of the life jacket and her father's hand, she managed to float briefly. That night, back at the apartment, Julia created a new drawing: 2 whales, one large and one small, swimming side by side in a colorful ocean under a bright sun. Robert framed the drawing and hung it next to the first one she had made at the hospital, the solitary whale in dark waters. The 2 drawings, side by side, told a story of transformation that words could never fully express. The following week, Robert made a symbolic decision. The Patek Philippe watch Victoria had given him for his birthday, a luxury item she frequently mentioned to display her generosity, was auctioned for a considerable sum, entirely donated to child protection organizations. The launch event for the Blue Whale Foundation, held at a cultural venue in central London, brought together professionals from various fields committed to child protection. Robert, for the first time, spoke publicly about his family's experience, without sensational details, but with the honesty necessary to inspire vigilance and action. Child abuse often occurs in plain sight, disguised as discipline, rigorous education, concern for rules and boundaries, he told the attentive audience. "We need to learn to recognize the signs, to hear the unspoken, to question behaviors we normalize, but which cause deep harm." Julia did not attend the event, protected from public exposure, but her spirit was present in every aspect of the foundation, from the logo inspired by her drawings to the central mission of giving a voice to silenced children. One ordinary afternoon, about a year after the pool incident, Robert came home and found Julia playing with Louise in the living room. The girls had built a fort out of sheets and pillows and were animatedly discussing their plans to become, respectively, a marine biologist and a veterinarian. Robert observed the scene from the doorway, invisible to the girls engrossed in their world of future possibilities. Julia laughed openly, gestured confidently, expressed her own opinions, behaviors that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. The scars would remain, Robert was sure of that. There would be difficult days, occasional setbacks, painful memories that would resurface at the most unexpected moments. But seeing his daughter playing freely, dreaming without fear, expressing herself without fear of punishment, Robert felt a deep certainty. They had weathered the storm and found calmer waters. On the coffee table, a new drawing by Julia awaited framing. A vibrant ocean where whales of all sizes swam in harmony under a multicolored sky. Beside the drawing, a sentence written in the imperfect but determined handwriting of an 8-year-old. "Even in the darkest ocean, whales are never truly alone." End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Robert and Julia's story has touched your hearts. To accompany this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories of overcoming and new beginnings. Find it by clicking the link on the left. If this narrative about courage, protection, and transforming trauma into social commitment resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Daily, we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the possibilities of healing and renewal. Share your own reflections on moments when small, silent signs prompted you to listen in your lives. How did you learn to interpret these signs? We look forward to reading your comments and continuing this important conversation about protection, vigilance, and hope. Until our next story,